You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Hello. Hey, Lila, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Renee?
Doing really well. I think I'm going to survive. Just got back from Mexico and a little bit of food poisoning. So, yeah,
that Montezuma.
Got a little bit of Montezuma, and but you know what? It's a great post-vacation diet program.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I didn't have to worry about all of the. I just have to say, and I was going to Google this when I got home. I want to know the amount of taco chips and Fritos and potato chips and Coca-Cola that are consumed in Mexico versus any other place in the entire world, because I was astounded. Even in the jungles of the Yucatan, there were racks and racks of bags from Frito-Lay and piles of Coke and soda pop in plastic and plastic everywhere. And obesity is amazing. And I'm like, there is no Burger King in this area of Mexico. We are literally out in the jungle, and everyone, including the children, are obese. But there were little tiny, like 7-Elevens full of taco chips, Fritos, Pringles, candy, donuts.
You just figured it out.
That's
what it is. Just a lot of fast food convenience stores. That's all you need.
Convenience store. And it's and I think it's all, I bet it's all from America. This is what America has contributed to the world. It's so sad. But anyway, I think it was the chicken I ate Wednesday night when I got home, and a couple hours later it was like, I might explode. I do feel like I'm going to explode. And so I'm just now getting back into feeling normal. So hoping it was just salmonella and not a parasite or something.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah.
You'll have to do another podcast just about your trip to Mexico, because I'd love to hear all the things you did down there.
Yeah, it was really fun. I went with John Lundwall and
fun.
with a company called Apex Expeditions. Okay. And these people know their Mayan culture. That's all I have to say. So it was interesting. But Lila and I, audience, if you're tired of listening to me ramble, Lila and I attended a Thrive conference in the 1st of March of this year. And one of the speakers at the conference was Judy Camp and her husband. And of all the speakers, I mean, all of the speakers this year were outstanding, really, really well. I loved Randy. Randy Bell is just a dream to listen to. And there were just so many great speeches. But I was particularly struck with Judy and her husband, because as a mom, as a person who has also resigned membership from the Mormon Church, and also a mom of children who did not follow the path of perfection, I just related to her so much. And what I loved about her was the story that she tells of struggles and the choices that she and her husband made to get over that mountain and come through it with joy. And so Lila and I decided we had to have Judy on our show to tell her story and to talk about how she became visible later on in her life and made choices to do so. That it wasn't just something that happenstance, that she and her husband said, this is what we're going to do. And we are going to have to work at this to make this happen. And they've made it happen. So I'm going to stop talking and we're going to bring Judy on. And ta-da, there she is.
Yay.
Hello.
Yay.
Judy.
Yes. And Judy is down in the valley of Jody Hildebrandt.
Yes. In fact, I was just looking at her on TikTok.
Oh my gosh. When I was down there at Thrive, I actually took an afternoon. I had to drive by her house. I had to get a selfie outside the compound, you know.
It looks like a compound. It does.
I've ridden my bike by there more than once just to see what's going on. It went on the market, then it went off the market.
I was wondering that because there wasn't a for sale sign. And I thought, well, that's probably because they don't want, you know, people driving by. But it gave me a better idea of the cul-de-sac and where Russell had to go to try to get some help from the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
It was really kind of fascinating. And I've decided, you guys, I've decided that I need to do a podcast because I have two things to say. Ruby Frankie is a sociopathic, evil person, but daggone, her hair looks great. That woman knows how to do her hair. I mean, the clips that they're showing on the 2020, I'm like, this is a fabulous braid.
Awesome cute hair. Yeah.
How does he do that? And she comes out of prison.
I know.
She goes in for her sentencing and she's got these perfect
Waves.
waves. I'm like, damn, how'd you do that? You know? And then my second observation, this says everything there is to say about me. So you know me now. My second observation is, even if you have a $5 million home, if you're doing a YouTube from your home and you're also holding children prisoner in your basement, I would suggest hiring an interior designer so that when the police and the cameras come in, they won't show how badly designed this home is. So those are my two suggestions. You know, if you have people locked in a closet, you might go, I need to get a designer in here. So when the cameras show up, they won't go, not only is she a sociopath, but what is up with purple sheets?
But she's a little tacky. Yeah.
I love the men's basketball shorts and the sweatshirt that she came out in. You know,
my favorite part of, did you see the 2020?
I missed it, but I've missed that, but I've seen so many pieces of it that
go back, find it on demand on YouTube.
I just watched it last night.
You don't have to watch anything else after that.
Yeah.
It says it all right there. Yeah.
Oh,
what were you going to say?
My favorite part was when they show up at her house and she says, I have my lawyer on my, and they grab her and pull her out. And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like, oh, I love that. Just look at the shock on her face that she was actually getting removed from her home.
And what must she have been thinking when there's a child locked up in her house and she's acting like, I don't know why you're here.
Why would you be here? What did I do wrong? Both of them saying, I didn't do anything wrong. I can't figure out why I'm here in prison. Why?
I put ropes around his wrist and he pulled on it. That's his fault.
It's his fault.
The best part.
He hurt himself. He shouldn't have messed with that duct tape and
But here's my other question. Even on the 2020, where were the Airbnb guests she said were in the other part of the house?
Hiding in another closet, maybe.
Like they should be interviewing those Airbnb guests that were supposedly over on the other side. Like, did you see anything? Were you aware there were children in your basement? You know,
I've never heard anything about Airbnb guests. That's news to me. I've never heard that.
That's on the 2020 when the police are at her house. She said, well, she goes, who else is in the house? And she goes, well, there's a little girl over there and I have some Airbnb guests on this side. And I was like, well, where are they at? Bring those guys out. I want to hear those guys.
You didn't hear nothing, you know, your place for this.
Yeah.
I would say.
I mean, I'm talking to my nail technician and she brings up Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Frankie. I'm like, okay. Wow, this has gotten out there. But anyway, okay, so it's you live St. George, Utah is probably one of the most beautiful places in Utah. Those mountains are just awesome. And I hate that word because it's overused, but in this case, those mountains are amazing.
They are.
Yeah. So what I want you to do, Judy, is tell the people, just start out by introducing yourself just a little bit, like, well, this is where I grew up. I grew up in a LDS family or a Methodist or whatever it is. Tell your story. And then we'll kind of, Lila and I will jump in and ask you the questions. But I really loved your story and how you and your husband came together and just the reality of how hard marriage is. And when people say we had children to save our marriage, I'm like, oh, well, that was your first mistake right there.
If we could only have some do-overs, right?
Oh, no kidding. No kidding.
I love them all.
Yeah, the whole time you were talking, I just kept thinking about, the funny joke about children are like pancakes. You should throw out the first one. I was like, yeah, we ruined that one. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So tell us your story. You're not from St. George at all. So tell us where you're from.
Well, so where I'm from, we spent the majority of years raising our family in Gilbert, Arizona.
Oh, okay.
And we found ourselves there after, quick moves to a handful of other places, but we settled there and raised our kids there and moved away for brief periods from there to Elk Grove, California, and to Maui. But both times we went back to Gilbert because we'd been there for so many years and built so many friendships that felt like home. So we stayed in Gilbert until we separated from the Mormon Church. And for anybody who's actively involved in the Mormon Church, you would know that there's a community. And when you change that, then you're making a big change to your social circle. It changes. So at that point, we tried to decide where we might want to live. And St. George has always been one of those places that we've liked. We've traveled through it. We like hiking. We like sunshine. So that's why we picked St. George. We weren't sure how we were going to deal with the fact that it was also considered a highly Mormon area, but we've done really well. We landed in a cul-de-sac that has lots of transplants from other states. And as soon as we got here, we decided we needed to be proactive about finding friends. And we joined a post-Mormon Southern Utah support group. And from that, we made a lot of great friends. And then after that, I joined a hiking group and a ski group and a book club and a coffee group. And we're in a good place. We've come through some of those really hard struggles in a pretty good place.
Now, most of the world will not know. We didn't know when we moved down here to Arizona. We didn't know anything about Arizona. All my husband knew was there were golf courses down here and there was sunshine. And we were living in Oregon at the time. So he said, what do you think about moving to Arizona? And I said, I don't think about moving to Arizona ever. And so we came down here and found, a golf community to live in. I didn't know anything. We didn't even look in Gilbert or Chandler or any of the they call it Little Mormon, Little Provo, or Little Utah. There literally is a church on every corner and very strong Mormon community in these places. And as I deconstructed and began to learn more about the history of the church, I didn't realize that there were people that were sent to Arizona to develop the territory as another extension of Utah. And so when you were living in Gilbert, which, by the way, are you keeping up with the Gilbert goons and all of the stuff that's going on?
Oh, there's always drama in Gilbert. Yes. And I think if you're talking about the racist group of teenagers Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they someone at least lived in a very prominent neighborhood that was technically in our ward. So it's penetrating Gilbert. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. So, so you actually did raise your children in a very Mormon community with friends and neighbors and school, even school people. Like, for example, I know in the case of the Gilbert Goons, the football coach was LDS, and he allowed that Renner kid, I think it was, to play, even though he was breaking rules and had served overnight in jail, but he played football again the next day. There's a lot of mixing, just like in Utah, with political and police force and everything with the church. So when you were raising your children, though, because you were in that fishbowl, right?
Yes.
Was it just blessed? I mean, did you just find it a great community?
Well, I kind of raised two sets of kids. I had two boys, and then 10 years later had a girl.
Oh.
And when we lived in Gilbert, we moved up in the world. We started in a modest little starter home and gradually got bigger, nicer homes in bigger, nicer neighborhoods. And so I knew a lot of people in Gilbert, from sports with my boys, from community theater with my daughter, older parents, younger parents. I knew a lot of people. But yes, we very much were in that bubble. And we were a little disappointed when the first son didn't choose to go on a mission, because, you know, the neighbors' kids are going on missions. But all that was kind of tempered, because when I got that daughter, she did everything I wanted her to. She was the little golden child in the ward. She was talented. She was smart. She was social. She was going to BYU Hawaii. I hung all my eggs on her, you know, all my eggs in her basket, that she was going to make me look great.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, in your case with your two boys, were you kind of struggling in the ward because your oldest son was not following the path? Did you have and I'll give you an example. And the reason I ask this is because more than once my husband was pulled aside and asked if our oldest son was getting the attention that he really needed at home, because he acted out a lot at church. He was just bored out of his mind, and he has, he and I both have trouble with impulse control. So if he was done with primary, he'd just get up and leave, Yeah. And so, we had people with perfect children that were always making comments on things we could do that would be better, to help him out. And my husband was always in positions of authority. So it's like, yeah, we got it. Yes, we are doing Fam Home Evening. Yes, we are reading our scriptures. Yes, we are. But guess what? He is his own person. And my favorite thing, and Judy, you'll probably, and Lila, you as well, one of the blessed things of getting older is looking back on the perfect parents that you grew up with, whose children have not turned out that well, and you're like, how did that work for you?
Yeah.
So at what age, so your daughter was 10 years younger than your second son.
Yep.
So that's a huge age gap.
Yeah.
And so how old was your oldest son before he really started to act out and you guys are like, what is happening here?
18 and 19. Okay. And that made it especially hard. He got accepted to ASU and, but had a girlfriend, and it was kind of a toxic relationship. They couldn't stand being together, and they couldn't stand being apart. Anyway, he got into ASU, and then I think that's when he, right at the beginning, started using drugs a little more frequently. I mean, he had dabbled with it in high school, and like any parent, you find evidence of their smoking pot, and you think it's a phase. It's no big, I'm not going to overreact. Right. I personally didn't smoke pot in high school, but my husband did, my sisters did. I mean, people smoke pot. Yeah. So I wasn't going to overreact. And, but then it really kind of mushroomed about that time when he got out, right after he got into ASU. So he ended up
mushroomed.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But that's when it started to get pretty bad. And about 19 was when we fully discovered he had an addiction. And I fervently tried to figure out what to do and how to help. By that point, I was living in Elk Grove and he had stayed in Gilbert. And my sister was seeing him and saying, it's not good. It's not good. You need to do something. And I kept thinking it wasn't quite as bad as she was thinking it was, but it became apparent to me that no, it was pretty bad. And then I found that there was not much I could do as a parent of somebody over 18.
That's right. That's exactly.
Very, very little.
Yeah.
So that's when, everything kind of spiraled for him. He's had a few spirals, but that was probably the beginning of it.
Right. So he was 18 or 19. And then how old was your second son?
They were 3.5 years apart. So he was 16-ish.
Okay.
And
so he went to Elk Grove with you when you guys moved there.
He did. Yeah.
Okay. And did he make that adjustment well so he was probably like what, a sophomore in high school?
Yeah. And so he did the 2 years in Elk Grove. Yeah, in Elk Grove. And he was pretty happy with our decision to move back to Gilbert. He had a lot of friends in Gilbert. And our daughter was young enough that the only reason we moved away to Elk Grove was because my husband was getting close to retirement age. And that would really impact the rest of his retirement. So we kind of tossed it up in the air, like, which of these few places should we move to? And because I had family kind of close to Elk Grove and I'd never lived near them, we just threw a dart and picked Elk Grove. He was doing most of his work in the Bay Area. And so we knew it was going to be temporary.
Yeah.
About 3 years and done.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. So, taking the daughter there and bringing her back and even taking Dusty out of high school for a couple of years and taking him back was kind of a weird thing to do, but it served a purpose. And everybody was excited to get back to Gilbert. Everybody, me, them, everybody.
Yeah. It's interesting as parents, as I watch my children parent their children, definitely a different style and so much more communication than I ever had with my kids. They do, the way they talk with each other is so much different than what I did. And we moved from out in the country back into the city, into suburbia, and never even thought to ask the children what they thought of it or how they would adjust. Our son was a freshman in high school and our other son was very much, he wasn't a big crowd person. He had one friend and he didn't want to leave that one friend and he was upset. And then the other daughter, we kind of moved in the fall. And so classrooms had already been assigned. So they kind of stuck her in the classroom with all the people they couldn't figure out what to do with. But she blossomed because that's her personality. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't even a thought process that they should be considered in this move. It was like, look, we're tired of being out in the country. We're moving back into the city and you're coming with us. So good luck, but it's amazing how people go about things differently nowadays, much healthier. But it sounds as though because your son was already off to college, that the other two adjusted very well. And but everybody was happy to go back to Gilbert.
Yeah. I was ready. My husband had retired. He wasn't quite sure what he was going to do at that point. And I just thought it'd be more fun to be close to some friends that had we had raised our families together.
Exactly. It's really interesting, Lila. You'll have to tell me, I don't know how much you guys moved around, but in the Mormon world, you can live within a proximity of, like, for example, we lived in the Pacific Northwest. Well, if you were in this subdivision or outskirts of Portland, Oregon, even though you were here, and here, at some point you all know each other because I lived here for a little while. I lived here for the other. You run into each other in the temple. You run into each other at some kind of large stake event or multi-stake event. And so you do build quite a large community of people. And so I can see where it's like, oh, in fact, when our son passed away, we went all the way back to Oregon for his memorial service because that's where he went to school. And those were the people that went to school with him. And so you go back to the people that were part of that important part of your life. So So you moved and the transition was easy, right?
Well, that one, yeah. It was, the thing that Mormon church does better than any other single thing is community.
Yes.
So even though I spent a few years in Elk Grove and kind of, built a couple of friends there and made some connections there, and I was going back to more like family. Lots of people that I knew and I thought knew well. And like I said, had raised two sets of family together. I had families that had boys, my boys' ages, and I could relate to them. And then I had younger families that had kids the ages of my daughter. And, we were people, we knew a lot of people. And
so was this prior to you leaving the church? This is
yes.
Prior. Okay.
Yes. And that's why things got very awkward very quickly.
Yeah. So tell our listeners, I love this story, of how your daughter was the beginning. She was the catalyst for this dramatic life change. So tell everyone what happened, because I love to say she was your perfect child.
She really was. And people who know her, I think when the families that we grew up with, anybody that knew her knew that we had a little golden child, and that nobody else could come to me with the information that she came with, that I would have listened to and responded the way I listened to her. And she'd earned that because she was a great kid. But so she was attending BYU Hawaii, and she was dating a boy that I had found out was not a student there. And in fact, he wasn't even a member there. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but that's okay. So she was home in Arizona with us over a Christmas break that lasted several weeks. And each Sunday we would all go off to church. And each Sunday when we would come home, she would go to her bedroom and change her clothes. And we would go into our bedroom and change our clothes. And this particular Sunday, she followed us into our bedroom. And that was very unusual. And she sat down in a chair in our bedroom and she said, with kind of a quivery voice, "Can I talk to you guys?" And I'll never forget it. My husband was taking his tie off and he had it half pulled off, and he froze, and I kind of froze and looked at her, and I thought for a split second, oh no, she's pregnant.
Yeah.
But then what she said was, "Have you guys ever heard of the gospel topic essays?" And I had no idea what she was talking about. And neither did my husband. And my husband has served a mission, and we've been active members of the church all our lives. And we still did not know what she was talking about. But what she was talking about was these essays that the church has come out with in the last, I don't know how many years.
2013, I think, is when it started.
Okay. And so we were quite caught off guard by this. We didn't know what she was talking about, but she had tears in her eyes, and she kind of finished the conversation with, "I do not believe in the Mormon church."
Woo!
I know.
So
I was like, she left the room, and first of all, Larry assured her, we both did, we loved her and we would figure this out. And we did not keep her at arm's length over this. We validated, this sounds really worrisome to you, and we'll figure this out. Mm-hmm. And after she left the room, I looked at my husband kind of in shock and said, "What did she say?" And he said, "I think she's leaving the church. I don't think she believes in the church." But he also told her, "Don't tell anyone. And just don't tell anyone until you get your degree in hand." Because what people really have a hard time believing is the church will keep your degree.
Yeah.
Hard to believe, but true.
That was really smart of him to be that quick in knowing that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think he was just thinking, you've worked so hard. Yes. So she went away back to school, like within just a few days after that. And the following Sunday, we were at church, and during the sacrament, maybe even, my husband is now looking online, trying to find these things that she's talking about. And he finds them. And the one that there are several of them. The one that he came across first, or that caught his attention, was the one about, it's called The Multiple Versions of the First Vision. And because his testimony really, really, really hung on the Joseph Smith story, he'd always been a little nuanced in many other subjects in regards to the church. The word of wisdom, we thought that was a little interpreted wrong. And tithing, we thought that's a little bit twisted the way they now require that. And but the Joseph Smith story was his thing. And so the multiple versions of the first vision blows that out of the water. And so he said by the time the closing prayer, he was convinced that he had been misled his entire life.
Oh my gosh.
So I guess he left that meeting thinking, how do we get on the same page in regards to this? He told me later he would have continued going to church every single Sunday if I had drawn a line in the sand, because our marriage and our relationship was more important than that, but that he had come to the conclusion that it wasn't right. So he started,
like during the sacrament.
Yeah, that's what, it's funny. It was pretty much opening prayer to closing prayer. He'd come to that conclusion because there was that one subject. And, we'd all been taught the story about Joseph Smith being a dullard and a poor farm boy. And how could a 13 or 14-year-old have come up with this? Well, there's a lot of explanation to how a 13 or 14, he wasn't 13 or 14.
Right.
He was much older, and he had all kinds of resources, and on and on and on. Anyway, so my husband decides that he is hopeful that I will come to the same conclusion, but he can't talk me into anything. So it was a delicate process for him to put the right podcasts in front of me that I would listen to, that little by little.
Now, did he think that because when he came home from church, I mean, I'm assuming that he went out to the car, you got into the car, you're driving home, and he says, I found the gospel topics essays. I've read this. I'm out of here.
No.
And you were like, okay, what? So how did he leave sacrament, and then tell us how that went?
Well, I don't know anything about that. He's looked these things up. Oh, I don't know that. And he then Googles. He said, if Tatum, our daughter, is comfortable Googling this stuff, I need to be comfortable Googling this stuff too. And he typed in the words Mormon stories, not knowing that it was.
Good job, SEO. Yes.
Yes. And the more he found, the more he was validated, and the more he was in shock, and the more he listened to. And he was getting ready to go on a road trip, and he downloaded a handful of podcasts and listened to them nonstop on this journey. And it was when he came home from that, he said, I found something that I think is interesting. And my head was already kind of very worried about my daughter, but thinking we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
But he handed me or told me about a podcast by, what's her name?
Lindsay Hansen Park?
Nope. That was one of my,
Gina Colvin.
No, it's the daughter of the guy who was really good friends with Packer, Malcolm Jepson. So what's her first name? Christine Jepson Clark.
Yeah.
And he was quite interested in that one because he and Christine's brother were good friends in high school, very good friends in high school.
Okay, there's a connection.
So he knew the family, he knew the world, he knew the neighborhood. And so he felt really, when he listened to that, he thought, oh, Judy will listen to this one. And so I just was willing to listen to the first. She does like 4 episodes, I think. 3, 4, 5, I don't know.
Yeah, she does a lot.
But I downloaded one because I was going on a trip. And when I got to my destination, I thought, okay, I need to hear the rest of her story. And that was the beginning of my rabbit hole. And then I listened to so many podcasts, and I would say, hey, if you don't have this book, order it for me on Amazon. And just book after book. No Man Knows My History. rough stone rolling, stuff very unbecoming the church. But I just too, once I kind of started entertaining the thought, could the church not be true? That's such a weird moment.
Yeah.
That when you one day I'd been at the gym running on the treadmill, listening to a podcast, and I think it was one about a mission president who was trying to groom his sister missionaries to be his next wives. And Larry had been out walking on the canal behind our house like he did every day and listening to another podcast. He came home and he took the earbuds out of his ears and he said, he started telling me about this podcast. And I was so primed because I had just been listening to something very horrific. And I said, do you think the church isn't true? And he said, yep, that's what I think. And I was like, oh my God.
Where were you?
I was
starting to think it?
I was so bothered by all of this stuff, but I kept going back to what we all do, which is I'm not the smartest girl on the shelf. I'm not there are people in my ward that I really revere who are swearing hand to God that this stuff is true. There are my parents, there's his parents, there's smart, admirable people who are embracing this. And a really thing I kept thinking was, I cannot believe that the leadership in the church knows these things. Yeah. Well, yes, they probably. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who it was that said that. I feel like it was not, I feel like it was Cheryl Bruno, but I could be wrong. But it was one of those people that are in her kind of camp where they were like, it was another woman that had written a book about something, but it was like, the apostles are very busy people. They are very busy. They don't have time to do all of this rabbit hole stuff like we do. And I was like, he's a cardiac surgeon and the other guy is a lawyer. I think they know how to study history. But it's the idea that they can know this and then purposely and with malice almost continue to lie. But I have to say, Judy, and Lila knows this, I have a true believing member husband. And he has, like I said, always been in positions of authority. He has had nothing but great experiences in the church. He is a humble man who had no idea what an assistant to the president was when he went on his mission. He just has never sought after positions of power. He just gets thrown into them by, I don't know. Okay, I guess I'm in the branch presidency. I'm 22. And so it goes about life very innocently and with the most kind and objectively positive outlook on life. So he is able to separate that with the good things the church does. And I am more of a factual, truth-seeking person where it's like, oh, you're lying. You're dead to me now. And so it's interesting that there are people, and that when I see this in my husband, I go, okay, that's Henry Eyring. They're not stupid. They do know, what's happening. They are aware of the church history, but they have had such amazing experiences that just supersedes the damage and the horror that is done, It's just a mindset. It's amazing mindset. Yeah. But
more though, don't you think it has also to do with the fact that they're extremely privileged?
Yeah, 100%.
White male,
right?
Businessman. Ta-da!
These guys they're getting paid. You don't think they're not?
They are.
In the positions that they're in. They have people adoring them. Just walking into a room, everyone stands up. They are adored. They have the fame and the fortune and the whole thing to go with it. If they were to leave based on the reasons why we left, what would become of them and their family? Like it's too much. It's too much to give up.
They've got too much invested and they're at the 11th hour.
And they're like, oh, well, let's just carry on until we die. Exactly. We'll just go along with everything. And I think in their mind, it's not a bad way to live. Compared to some other things, this is actually benign enough that I can continue the charade until my time here is over.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It definitely is. And I know in our case, we moved down to Arizona, so he was released from his callings. He's been in the position, so he's not seeking after, he never was seeking after anything. He now has a non-member wife, so he'll never be put back into positions of authority. And he's more than happy to go over and clean the church on Saturday mornings. And so he's retired. Like you say, he's in the 11th hour. He's like, I'm good. We have a great family. My wife and I love each other and we enjoy ourselves together. I'm going to go to church on Sunday. That's what I do. I'm good. It doesn't affect him at all, And so it's just interesting because Judy, I don't know, did you listen to the last Mormon Stories with Amy and Chelsea Homer and Mindy Gladwell?
That's a good one.
The way they describe the patriarchy, who it hurts and who it affects, says it all. No more discussion needs to be ever said again. They explain it so well. Mm-hmm. And when I listened to that man that I think was it Chelsea or Amy that talked about the high priest who resigned his membership on the high council because he sat there one day and realized there were no women in the room.
Yeah. I'm not sure who said it. I was listening, but I wasn't watching.
Yeah, it was beautiful. But that's exactly, and Judy, I was with you. It's like, I started reading the CES letter and I was like, I don't care. There's a steel sword. Joseph Smith was a prophet. The Book of Mormon is true. Gordon B. Hinckley, I love Gordon B. Hinckley. And he said, as long as the Book of Mormon is true and Joseph Smith was a prophet, everything else is just worldly guga. And so like you say, it just takes a little bit more digging before you go, oh, that's not true either.
Yep.
Yeah. Did he say he was the one that said either Joseph Smith was a prophet or this thing is a fraud?
I think he even used the words like the biggest fraud ever or something.
Fraud ever perpetrated on mankind or something like that.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding.
You got it. Excellent. Yeah. You win the deal or no deal. Yeah. So, and now, but see, again, we were living in Arizona in not an LDS community. COVID is going on. I walked away from the church at the perfect time in someone's life to do that. You were living in the middle of this freaking fishbowl. How did you do that? And who went to the bishop first?
Well, we so our daughter was getting married by that point. She had ended up engaged with that non-member kid, and we adored him. We think he's awesome. But so she was getting married in Hawaii, but then going to have a backyard reception in Gilbert a few months later. And I really wanted her to experience the celebration from the community the way I had celebrated with my friends and all the other young women and young men in the wards and neighborhoods that we knew. Yeah. So I didn't want to tell anybody until her reception had come and gone.
Good for you.
Yeah. And so that happened. She got married in late March. And then she just had until June was when the reception was in. Actually, a friend offered their backyard because it was bigger and more accommodating than mine. And so the next day after her reception, we had now had months to process this. And my husband was ready to pull the trigger. But I was afraid that by doing it, it would instantly get out. So the day after her backyard reception, I took a thank you gift to 3 people that had helped me the most in this reception. One was my sister. I had one sister that lived nearby. And so I took this little gift over to her and thanked her for her help and told her I had something I needed to tell her. Oh. And she cried and I cried. And she did say, though, that I I trust in you enough to know that you are not doing this rashly, that you have given this a lot of thought, and that that you must have this might have been quite a journey for you to get to this decision. And I appreciated that from her. And then I went to another friend's house and told her and gave her the gift. And she said, I want you to know this changes nothing. And I said, well, I hope not. But if it does, I understand, because I'm the one that's changing the rules here. But I hope it doesn't change anything, because I value our friendship.
Oh.
And the third person that I went to tell was Larry and I had a friend couple that we dearly, dearly love. And we travel with them, and we raised our kids together, and they were what we would call our real best friends. And so I had to wait for her to get home from work. And I also wanted Larry to go with me. So I called her about 5:30 and said, hey, are you home? Can we stop by for a minute? And it was very unusual for us to do that. And she said, sure, come on over. But secretly, they thought that we were going to come over to tell them we were getting divorced, because it was so unusual. So we sat down in their living room like home teachers, and we chose the less is more. You know, we just wanted you guys to know that we're doing this, and we wanted you to hear it from us. And we love you, and we just hope you'll respect our decision. And so they did. We all agreed that as long as we don't talk about this, the friendship can continue. And it actually really has. It has survived it. We've continued to travel with them and meet up with them and go to Maui and go on cruises. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. But those three.
Do you not talk about it?
Well,
That's hard.
that's on us, you know.
Yeah.
I have to bite my tongue. I valued their friendship enough that I wanted to choose. And also, I also wanted to keep the relationship in a place that when or if the time comes that they find themselves in the same situation, that I will not have said things that make them want to keep me at arm's length. So that's tricky.
That's so
really
good.
tricky.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, because oftentimes in your friend group, it's what you have in common. Like you say, when I remember going out to lunch with my girlfriends, and what do we talk about? Relief Society, kids, and then once your kids are grown and gone, you're not talking about football, baseball anymore. You're talking about the ward activity and the new high council person. I mean, that's part of your lingo. Mm-hmm. So, when you guys are together and you're in Maui, are you just talking about this, the greatest vacation? I love this beach, political stuff. I mean, how do you avoid this elephant?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it was trickier than others. For the most part, the friendship was founded so much in that we knew each other's kids. We knew each other's children that our kids had married. We knew their parents. They knew my parents. Okay. There's a lot to talk about. There's shared experiences. Remember that trip we went on to Mexico? How are you? Jobs. So we found that the relationship survived it, and so I'm
amazing. Did you ever have? Because now you haven't moved yet. You're still in that community. Did you become the project in the ward? And, that kind of thing. So how was that? How did the word receive?
Because we'd used quitmormon.com. So that day after my daughter's thing, we went online and used quitmormon.com. And it's quick. And it was before it got tricky, having to get things notarized. But within about 10 days or so after that, I think, a friend of mine who happened to be the Relief Society president, I was playing racquetball. And she said, hey, I was going to tell you on a Monday, I was going to tell you that yesterday at the Bishop's Ward Council meeting, a statement was read that said the camps have left the church and they've done it via an attorney. And we are not to reach out to them in a church related capacity.
What? They read that? Oh my gosh.
Yep. In the council meeting, not from the pulpit.
Okay.
So that's for the head of all the auxiliaries. So, the leaders of the primary, Sunday school, all those people are in there. And so he was a very new bishop and very kind, and just wanted them. He, I think, was obligated to read that, and the ward responded. Now, some might view that as kind of a shunning, but I think what he was saying is don't reach out to them to try to woo them back. Reach out to them if you're neighbors or friends, but don't reach out to them in an effort to fellowship them back.
Yeah.
And our son passed away in this period. We had a son pass away. And that same Relief Society president called me and asked me if she could come over. And my husband was a little worried about what's she coming over here for? Is she going to, are they going to try to talk us into having the funeral? And when she came over, she said, I just wanted to let you know that the bishop has told me that if you guys want to use the chapel, the cultural hall, any part of the building for your service, you are welcome to do it, and to do it however you want.
Wow.
I think he would not have been permitted to do that, especially not now.
Yeah.
But I think he was trying to show love,
Yeah.
and we declined.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a great, sweet gesture, and I think if he'd have been, I don't think it would have been approved for him to have done that. Really.
Oh, yeah. So he was just being, well, okay. So that's a good question. Tell the audience a little bit about your son's passing, because that was just shocking. And it happened after you've left the church. So you don't have the understanding or the thought that you're going to see each other again, or that you're an eternal family. So talk about how you handled that, because
that was kind of horrible, because before that we knew the plan, but so that was kind of horrible. I was in Hawaii because that youngest daughter had married he's actually an officer in the Coast Guard. And so they were stationed in Hawaii for their first couple of assignments. So in March, I guess it was. So in March of 2017, both my daughter and Dusty, our second son, got married. One in Hawaii. Tatum married Jack on Oahu, and Dusty married a girl named Elizabeth in Gilbert, Arizona. So I was then in Hawaii for the birth of our first grandbaby a little later. Let's see. So that would have been in 18. And the baby was just a couple of days old, and Tatum and Jack had gone back to the hospital because they were keeping her for a few days so that they could observe her. She had a little bit of a lung infection or something. And so I was home alone at their house in Hawaii, sitting on the floor, putting together a baby swing. And I got a phone call, and the phone call was from my sister. My daughter-in-law had called her to tell her that Dusty had been taken by ambulance to the emergency room. And like I told you guys at Thrive, the day before this, Dusty had been air evac'd off of a job site because he had this severe abdominal pain. And in the hospital emergency room, they couldn't find the cause of his pain. So ultimately they released him and sent him home. And he was a little embarrassed. They kind of had convinced him that it must have been like constipation or something. Anyway, he was pretty embarrassed, but went home. And so this is the next day that Elizabeth is panic stricken because he's in this horrible, horrible pain. And instead of calling me, she calls my sister and asks her to meet her at the hospital. And my sister meets her there. And shortly after Dusty arrives at the hospital, they pronounce him dead. And so Wanda had to call me. My sister had to call me. And I then had to call Larry. Larry was in Las Vegas at a softball tournament. Elizabeth had called him too to let him know that Dusty was en route to the hospital. And so we were also worried. Larry was getting ready, packing his stuff up to head back to Gilbert. And when I called, and one time I was telling somebody about telling him that Dusty had passed, and he goes, "Oh, you didn't tell me anything. The sounds you were making told me what I needed to know." And in hindsight, I think I could not get words out to say that we had lost our son. Yeah. So he headed back to Gilbert, and I waited for Tatum and Jack to get back from the hospital. And when they got home from the hospital, I was upstairs, and I didn't realize they'd come back home. And I was upstairs and in a bedroom just sobbing. And if I'd known they'd come in the door, I would have fought to get my composure, because here's this young, sweet little couple so excited about their first baby. And the first night she'd come home without the baby, she was a little emotional, and I'd had dinner ready. And I thought, tonight's going to be a little easier on her. So she's going to be a little stronger. She knows the baby's going to be okay. So, but when she walked in the door and they could hear me upstairs, and they had to come up those stairs trying to figure out what was going on with me. And I had to tell her what had happened. I mean, that's a hard conversation to have with somebody who's got a brand new little baby. And
yeah.
So anyway.
And the tragic thing of these events is when they happen surrounding other things that are supposed to be a joyful experience. Yeah. And so now that's been tainted.
Yes, forever.
And so that will be the memory, rather than the beautiful memory of the first grandbaby.
Yeah.
Now that was where I was when Dusty died.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's now, did you, and tell the audience, because it was just amazing, the actual cause of his death. Rare, crazy.
Yeah, we ended up getting a full autopsy because we were on the advice of a friend, an attorney, because we were so perplexed. He'd been in the hospital the day before. Was it malpractice? Was it negligence? What caused this? We thought maybe he'd had a ruptured appendix. Well, when the results finally came back, it was a rupture of the iliac artery, which is the artery that feeds blood to the lower part of the body. It's almost always fatal, because you can't, even when it happens, you cannot get into that part of the body fast enough to do anything about it. It is so it's extremely rare, and when it does occur, it occurs to obese men, usually over the age of 70. And Dusty was 31 years old, and he was thin, and he was fit. And it was completely random and unexpected and a shock.
Yeah. And he had only been married for about a year.
He'd been married a little over a year.
Yeah. And no children yet.
No children.
Now, did you ever have anyone, and I don't know if you would have even heard it if there had been scuttlebutt of any kind, but did you ever have anyone judge you've got a daughter that's married outside the temple. I don't know if Dusty was married outside the temple.
Yes, married outside the temple.
And then he passes away, and then your son. Did anyone ever correlate that with your leaving the church?
Well, we never got anything said to us directly. Right. And I, like you said, I don't know if people did. I felt aware that was something maybe I would have thought, if you go back a few years, that, but no, nobody said anything directly to us, but you feel it, you think it, you wonder what they say about you.
Yeah. Especially when you have really, really imbecile people like Brad Wilcox.
Oh yeah.
Making comments about the people that aren't members of the church will step over a dead body before they help you. Just comments like that as if there is still this guise of perfection and nothing bad will happen to you if you stay in the church and you stay active and you stay on the covenant path. Nothing bad will happen. Therefore, anything bad that happened. Are we going back to the biblical? What did the parents do to cause this child to have cerebral palsy? Are we going there? Are we going there? But yeah, you never know. My husband is very sweet, and it's very frustrating for me because I want him to be a gossiper. Because when he comes home from church on Sundays, I'll say, "What did they say about me?" And he did say there was an older guy. We live in kind of an older ward, and I had a guy reach over and say, "Hey, my wife and I would love to take you and your wife out for dinner." And my husband goes, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." And he said the next Sunday he was made the ward mission fellowshipping.
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah. So it was like he and his older wife were going to come and take us out for dinner and fix me. And I said, dang, honey, that would have been so much fun. You know, you should have said, sure.
Yeah, they would have gotten an earful if you just got loose.
Yeah. I said, did you tell her I'll try to make it my stripper pole class at the same time, but you know, I'll try to be there.
He probably wants to keep you at arm's length from some of these.
Yes, he is. He's protecting me. But yeah, you always think you're possibly a project, you know, but I can't. So now you've got, you know, you're still in Gilbert at this time. You've had this horrific. What did you do as far as a funeral service for him in this community of people who knew him and loved him and grew up with him? How did you handle that church-wise?
I am sure that so many people felt so awkward because we chose to have it in a funeral home in Mesa. He was cremated, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And it was very, Larry, I don't remember how he put it out there, but that he please come in casual dress. And my friend's husband, the one of the friends that I went to visit, and she said, please don't, this doesn't change anything. Her husband was our bishop at a time, and now they are mission presidents in Houston.
Oh my gosh.
And she said when he was getting ready for Dusty service, he just kept saying, I can't wear a tie. Can I really? And she goes, do not wear a tie. You cannot wear a tie. They've asked you. And he just felt so weird not putting a tie on, but he's a good person. But so I think because it was a full room, and because we did things our way, we had musical numbers that you wouldn't see at a normal, a typical, I should say, Mormon funeral service. We called it a celebration of his life. We had big, giant pictures of him everywhere. It's not your typical LDS funeral.
Yeah.
But
it's probably beautiful.
Yeah.
It was full of love, and it honored him. It honored all parts of him. And that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
No hijacking it, no making it a missionary tool. No.
It was about him and his life and his experiences and your family's experiences, and not a missionary thing. And you didn't have some weirdo high council person speaking that's never met you or anyone in your family. Yeah.
Nope.
Exactly.
No.
Making it into a church meeting.
Yeah.
Instead of a funeral. Yeah.
Yeah. And the music restrictions that are put in, and it's just, again, another example of where does your critical thinking, you know, at a time when you are thinking, I want to celebrate this person that we've lost, but okay. I mean, I can't remember her name. There's a TikTok lady that I love that she spent the last few months talking about grief because she lost a 3-year-old son. And she had spent hours making a celebration of life film that she wanted to show. And they said, you can't show that in the chapel. And, you know, it's just simple, silly things like that. But so now your oldest son is doing his thing. Your daughter is still in Hawaii.
Yeah. No. Meanwhile, let's see. But at that time, she couldn't even come to her brother's service because her baby was still in the hospital.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh.
So she wasn't even able to come to that. So she's still in Hawaii at that time. And we had already sold our home and bought a home in Ivans. And everything was in motion for us to move. And the older son was hanging on to sobriety, but barely. Yeah. He was a hulking, man-size, emotional wreck. Yeah. Losing his brother. He and his brother were so close. They were so close because the oldest one, Crosby, struggled a lot with depression too. And so he didn't have any friends other than his brother. His brother had a wife and a life and friends and a job. But the oldest one, he lived in our home at the time, and he would have hopes that, Dusty might stop by on his way home from work and they could watch a show or play guitar or share something funny that they saw. And if Dusty's plans changed and he didn't come by, it would just, really disappoint Crosby. So he really had no one but Dusty.
Yeah.
So when Dusty died, Crosby literally wanted to die. I mean, his quote when Larry zipped home from in the middle of the night back to Gilbert was, "Why would Dusty die when I am such a piece of shit?
Yeah.
Why would Dusty die?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's hard to have one son gone and the other one mentally checking out.
Yeah.
And so we told him, if you can stay sober, you can come to Gilbert to Ivan's with us. We have a casita, and we'll support you through this tough period. But didn't last, and he ended up with drug-related offenses and ended up in and out of Gunnison Prison, which is the local prison here.
Yeah.
And,
It's amazing to me, like you say, at that time of his life, he's struggling to hang on to sobriety. And then you have this traumatic experience happen that anybody, even if they weren't struggling with sobriety, would probably start having some kind of an issue. So I can't imagine the loss that he must have felt. And and that's just putting another layer on what you're going through. But you already had plans of moving to Ivan's. And tell the people why you had decided. And I know your husband was retired, but tell them why you thought we got to get out of Gilbert. And this was before Dusty had his issue.
Well, because I attempted to keep going to Relief Society because I thought,
even though you resigned, you've resigned.
Yes, but for a very short time. Okay. Because I love friends.
Yeah.
And so I asked the Relief Society president, same girl who told me about reading the thing in the bishop's meeting. I said, "Would you mind if I come to Relief Society?" And she said, "No, of course." She never said, "As long as you don't make comments." She just said, "No, come on." So the first Sunday I went was 4th of July, because remember, this was in late June that we did this.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, I can do this. I'm patriotic. I can do this. And so the second week, it was a totally different story. The lesson was on celestial marriage or something that I was just bristled the whole time. And I got in the car and I drove home and I thought, I can't do it. I can't do that anymore.
No.
And told Larry, I'm done. I cannot sit and be quiet. And anyway, so I found out I was getting left out of everything. I mean, there were hikes that were being planned. There were lunches that were getting planned. There were all kinds of social things that I would have been a part of, but I was just out of sight, out of mind. It's nobody's fault. You're just not there. They don't think about you. So the relationships, are a mile wide and an inch deep. And you realize that. And you think, I'm not going to them as I thought I was.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of the idea where we don't shun people. It's like Judy has not, like you said, Judy has not changed in any way, except for she doesn't believe the church is true, but she still hikes. She still reads books. She still does these things. We know her. We've known her for 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yet immediately you're cut off.
Yeah. And my husband said sometimes maybe you weren't cut off as much as you felt cut off. And I think both are true. I think I might have read a little more into the stuff, but regardless, the bottom line was I was now lonely in a place I had lived for many, many years. I had those couple of great friendships and my sister, but for the most part, things had changed.
And did you feel as though that couple of friends that hung on, they were still like, oh, we better contact, we're going to go hiking. We're going to go to the book club. We're going to go to Relief Society. We got a Relief Society thing to go to. We should probably call Judy once in a while. Mm-hmm. So you were still an afterthought. Did you feel like that at all?
Yeah. Well, not even getting those calls, just they were happening and I wasn't even aware of them. if it wasn't a couple that we just would have go to dinner with anyway, then no, I wasn't getting reached out to. And maybe the bishop's comments scared him away. I don't know. Doesn't matter.
They didn't know what to do.
Yeah, didn't know what to do.
Don't contact them, said the bishop. So like, okay.
Yeah,
that means everything. That means lunch and hikes. So
it's a lot of your social life just boom, just gone.
Yes. And so my husband started talking about maybe moving just across town to a community in Mesa where you can be part of us. He plays a lot of softball, where you live by the softball fields, and it's kind of a thriving little senior softball community. And I said, well, if we're going to pack up everything we own, why are we staying in Mesa?
Yeah.
We're downsizing out of a big house. We're loading up our stuff. We might as well go somewhere that offers more than Mesa. Mesa was getting hot, and Phoenix and Gilbert hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. So that's when we started looking at different places, and St. George kind of landed in our laps. Like, why not think about there?
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love what your husband said. Lila, do you remember this? He said, we said, okay, our kids are grown and gone. We've left the church. If we're going to have friends, we're going to have to do this.
Yes, he did.
I love that.
Yeah.
So talk about how you did that, because I hear that. I remember as an active member of the church sitting in on, as you mentioned, ward council meetings, and someone would say, well, so-and-so doesn't think anybody likes her. And I said, well, does so-and-so make any effort at all to be friends? Because we're all busy. We're busy. I've got 6 kids. I'm primary president. We're all busy doing stuff, and they're just sitting there with their arms folded with the brows. So you, and I love that your husband said, oh no, that's not their job. That's our job. Mm-hmm. So talk about that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, one time when we were young and we moved into a ward in Southern California, and the bishop wanted to meet with us after church one Sunday, and he asked us, how do you like it? And how are you doing? And we said, great. We're looking forward to getting to know people, and we love it here. And he said, that's so interesting, because the last couple I interviewed right before you guys, they were so doom and gloom. Oh, we don't want to be here. Wish we weren't here. And he said, I think a new ward is what you make it. You get out there and you make friends. So in a different setting, here we were now out of the church in St. George, having just had the rug pulled out from under us in several ways. Yeah. And thinking, what are we going to do about it? So my husband got online and he said, I wonder if anytime you live in an area where there's lots of Mormons, there's bound to be lots of post-Mormons now.
Yeah.
I mean, unlike if you lived in Pennsylvania, or if you lived in,
that's Mexico.
True.
So I thought, well, you're right, because I was a little scared of how over the top the Mormons are in St. George. I mean, they're over the top. So he got online and found that there was indeed a group that meets up every Sunday at this particular place. So we started going.
Is that Wayne's group?
Wayne's group.
Yeah.
Wayne has become a great friend.
Do they meet every Sunday?
Every Sunday.
Is it the Red Lion still?
No, the Red Lion was only once a month. When they would have a speaker, they would go to the Red Lion.
Oh, okay.
Every Sunday, they used to meet at the Smith's grocery store over there in Dinosaur Crossing in their meeting room or conference room.
Yes.
Conference room.
It's since been moved, because we now meet at Switch Point, which is part of the homeless shelter, because one of our fellow post-Mormons is the CEO of Switch Point. And also Wayne Hepworth is on the board with Switch Point and got permission to use this room on Sundays. So for several years now, we've met at Switch Point 1:00 every Sunday. But through going religiously for the first year we were here or so, we would gather friends. And, just like anything, it's like a ward. Not everybody that came in and out of that group were people that we would go on a trip together with.
Yes. Yeah,
but
just like you say, you're not going to click with everybody. There's going to be somebody that you click with.
So one time we met a couple of great couples that have come out of there. One couple, we were after the meeting, Larry and I, and they happened to be with our shopping carts getting a few things before we head out, and we were going past each other, and the conversation was, we should get together. Yeah, we should get together. And then another couple came in. They lived up north and they came occasionally. And one Sunday they came, and the conversation after the meeting was, we should get each other's numbers. And I pulled my phone out and I said, yes, we are getting each other's numbers right now. Yes. Here's mine. What's yours? And one of the husbands says that he thinks that was such a funny thing, because that kind of was when we really started to reach out to each other socially and plan things and potlucks. And we now have accrued, I would say, 40 people that 20 couples at least, where on any given weekend, we could say, who wants to go to a movie? Who wants to do a potluck? Who wants to go line dancing? Who wants to? It is a thriving, fun, deep, authentic social circle.
Interesting. Yeah. That's amazing. So what would you say, in a reverse situation, right? So now do you have any mixed faith couples in this group? Are they all ex-Mormons?
I would say we do have one or two, maybe three that are mixed faith couples. And when we invite them to come to a potluck and bring their husband, we're like, the first couple of encounters are interesting. Like, do you think he'd want to come? And she said, yeah, I think he'll come. And when he comes and he gets to know these awesome other men who he has to admit he respects them because they're just like him. They're doctors and lawyers and retired businessmen. These are not people who are beneath him. Yeah. So it's hard not to give some credit to that. So the
same experiences. Like, I know we get together with up there with Martine and Yvonne, and my husband loves these men, and they can talk bishop talk. There's, when I was a bishop, did you ever have, there's still something, you still got the lingo, you still have the verbatim, the experiences and this kind of stuff. It's like, he's just not going to have a glass of wine, and he's okay with that.
Exactly.
So that's beautiful. Yeah. I love that example. And it makes me want to, I remember going to a Thrive Salt Lake, and I signed up to be a Scottsdale rep for a Thrive thing. And for some reason, I've emailed the people that have emailed me back, but then I don't get a response. And, but just doing a meetup is better than trying to do this Thrive thing, So just organizing a meetup, I'd be curious. I know we did in this whole golf community. There was one couple that actually moved 2 doors down that were members of the church, and I was already out. And they came over, they brought the banana bread. They tried to do the, hey, we're Mormon, you're Mormon, let's get together and be friends. And I was like, yeah, this is not going to happen, because he was the typical Salt Lake City, I'm better than everybody, just asshole. And his sweet wife was just the sweetest little submissive, lovely, lovely person. But he was the typical, and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. So we never did get together with them. But in this whole community, there's just one other couple that's moved in that, again, I don't have any interest in, but I'd be curious to see in the community that's just right outside the door, how many there are. So just starting a meetup you're inspiring for that, because, at our age, it's really hard to make friends at our age. And I don't know about you, Judy, because I know you're active. Lila, you're active as well. I like pickleball, but it's not my life.
Yeah, sure.
And in this community, if it's not your life, then we have no business associated.
Yeah, you said that. Yeah. Huh.
So
what's hard though? Both of you have husbands. Let me tell you, being a single ex-mo is another story.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're now one notch more. You're like the
You're
third.
right.
You're the girlfriend that you don't want to invite.
Yeah.
Especially when you're gorgeous. It's like, I'm not inviting her.
You're very sweet. But no, I think, at first, when I first left I had girlfriends in my ward and my, extended ward area that we skied together. We did birthday lunches. We walked together every morning. It was a thing. And at first they continued to include me. But what I found was I couldn't deal with the conversation because it was all of them and then me. So they were talking Relief Society. They were talking so-and-so gave a lesson and what did you think and blah, 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 blah. And I was the one thinking to myself, I can't even say a word. I can't say a word because if I do, they're going to look at me like, this is why we probably shouldn't invite you to our things anymore because you don't agree with us anymore. And it got less and less and less. And now they just don't call me. They don't invite me to anything anymore. And so I really I have no one. I have my boyfriend who lives in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And I have my work associates and they're all like 20, 25, Yeah. So it's hard. It's hard where I'm at. My neighbors are all very nice on the surface. They're all active Mormon.
Where do you live?
I live in Orem.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
So you know what I'm talking about.
If you got involved in a meetup of post-Mormons where there were couples, would your boyfriend go to those with you?
He's a never mo. We have gone to a few things. Yeah. We went to Cara Burrell had a birthday party and invited me and a +1. So I brought him to that. Problem is he is sober. He's been sober for 40 years and they're all drinking.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So he's like, this is really my scene. And I'm like, I know it's not my scene either, really, because I don't drink either. And I'm not going to drink because he doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to start drinking now.
Yeah.
Really need to do that, especially if I'm dating a guy who's sober.
Yeah.
That's something that I wouldn't just introduce.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Say, being a never mo, it's like a perfect example. Speaking of Mexico, the people that were on this tour were people who were really into Mayan ancient cultures. So they would sit around at night and they would talk about, pyramids and Egyptian and the culture and, very almost astronomical things, cosmos and physics type things that was all involved in, how did the pyramids get built? This is a community of people that have things in common and their language is completely different. So you're, this guy is not even going to say, well, yeah, I'm an ex-mo. I was a young men's president. So it's like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Half the time he's looking at me like, what does that mean? What is that? What is that phrase they just said? And you all laughed. Had no idea. Yeah. And so like, I've taken him to a few things. Rebecca Biblioteca and Landon have invited us to dinner or breakfast a couple of times because they live in Orem. And we've gone with them. But once again, he feels like he doesn't get in on the jokes. He's not in on the lingo. He feels weird, like they're all chatting about Mormon stuff.
Yeah.
And he really doesn't get it. So the only part he gets is he happens to be an African American. So he gets that the blacks were not given the priesthood and that there's racism. He gets that. But that's where it kind of ends because he really knows very little about Mormonism.
We also have a coffee group that a lot of the women in our coffee group are a couple of them widowed, a couple of them single, recently divorced, never married. We've got a variety of women in our coffee group. And that's every Monday. And we have grown.
I tried to go to the coffee group here.
What's that?
I tried to go to the coffee group here. It was awful. I went once and it was awful. No one even spoke to me. They looked at me like, who are you? That we have our group. What are you doing here?
It was a post-Mormon coffee group, but they already had their clique established.
Yeah. Yeah, I was such the odd woman out in that group. I thought, okay, I'm never going back. No one said one word to me. They're like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And then off they went on their conversation. And I sat there for 45 minutes. And then I just thought, okay, bye-bye. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I'm kind of in a weird spot right now, but it's okay. Like I'm not sad.
Yeah.
I'm just glad I'm not going to church. I'm just happy not being there.
Yeah.
So okay.
Interesting. When you get together, Judy, with these groups, what do you find? Do you feel like there is a topic that is discussed? I mean, are you guys up and discussing the news, like the Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrand? Are we all talking about Lori Vallow and all that stuff? Is it kind of Mormon related a little bit?
Well, my next door neighbor, who's a Nevermo, also wanted some friends, and she asked one time, "Can I go to your coffee with you?" And I said, "Sure." And technically, you're supposed to be a member of WACA to go because it's a WACA sanctioned meeting. But I don't care about that. So I just said, "What's that?"
What does WACA?
Of a certain age.
Women of a certain age. It's Kim Sandberg Turner started it. So started out at women over 50. Now it's women over 40. But it's for women like me who needed friends. That's what the whole point was.
Right.
So anyway, I said, you need friends. Yes, come and go. And she was kind of dumbfounded by some of the subjects that would come up. And for us, it's like, oh yeah, one more example of something really bizarre. And her jaw would be hanging down when we would be talking about bishops' interviews or something, whatever. Mm-hmm. But so what we have found with our coffee group is we're all like a family being raised in the same abusive household. We all know the trauma that we shared, or at whatever level, because for everybody it's different.
Right.
But we all share that experience in some way. Mm. But we are building beyond that. We are getting very interested in where people go on vacations and what they're doing when they're not with us, travels or books or recipes, or we try to keep politics out of it.
Good.
Because, you might think everybody at the table agrees with you. And then if you've got one person who's slightly somewhere else, they'll feel alienated and kind of attacked. And so I have on more than one occasion said, zip it. We're not talking about politics. Don't care what it is you have to say. And I probably agree with you, but we are not talking about it.
Yeah.
And that coffee group has gotten all of us thrive on it so much that, it used to be 5-6 women. Now it's often 18.
Do you take over a Starbucks?
Well, we meet in Harmon's, and they have a coffee shop at the bottom, and you can go upstairs where there's tables. And we've had to migrate to a different area up there to accommodate more women. And we break into smaller tables because we found that all of us trying to be around one table, you couldn't hear each other.
Yeah.
So now we break into 2 or 3 tables so that there's usually no more than 8 or so at a table where you can really ask questions. How are you doing? How's that cancer treatment going? And listen to each other. And so how was your trip to see your grandkids? How did that go? And we really ask each other questions, and we're interested and we listen. And then the next time we get together, there's something there that we can revert to, like, so did you like that doctor you went to? Or
that's fascinating. Lila, I kind of can see where you're coming from, and there is definitely an experience connection that I feel like. I remember going to a retreat. I wanted to go to Telluride. I'd never been to Colorado, and this retreat was being held. And when I got there, these amazing women, they're all sitting in a circle, and they're introducing each other, and they're telling their story. Every single one of them had gone through a traumatic breakup, divorce, infidelity, abuse. I mean, every story. And I was kind of like, I didn't know that's what we were doing. I don't.
What am I gonna say?
I don't fit in to this, and I felt very alienated, and that I had nothing in common with these people. This was their language. This was their what they knew and what they connected with. And so I thought, yeah, that's not my vibe. And then I went to another one where everyone was doing yoga and breath work and sound bowls. And I'm like, I don't want to breathe like that. I just want to go on a hike and chat with people the whole time we're on the trail, you know? And so I didn't fit in. I just didn't fit in. That wasn't my thing, you know? So I can see where you're, especially where you live. I mean, where you're a hard time trying to find a quilting. Is there a quilting group that, you know?
Probably. They're all Mormon, I'm sure.
Well, yes, and they're 98 years old. So I don't know if there's, I don't know. Well, Judy, what would you say? What would be your top 3 things if you, as like I said, the thing that really drew me to you was the idea that you had to be the one to make this happen, and that you didn't let your trauma change you and your husband into negative, cynical, we've been lied to, you know, you didn't do that. You are happy. You are active. You have found happiness without, are we doing therapy? I don't know. I'm not judging. I'm not saying anything bad about therapy, but you've found your own form of therapy, which is hiking, coffee groups and softball, you know? And I love that. So if someone was at the Thrive, did you have anybody that came up to you and like, what would be the 1 or 2 things? I don't have to do 3. 1 or 2 things that you would say, I can't give you a magic pill, but I can just tell you what we decided to do and it's worked. What would that be?
Well, being proactive and saying yes to anything that came across our paths. The first invite that we got out of that post-Mormon group were 2 single women who had been, one been married and divorced, the other I don't think had ever been married, but they felt sorry for us because we were clearly the brand new people and invited us to go. We moved here in late October and invited us in November to go to the Christmas program, a Western Christmas program at the Performing Arts Center for Dixie. We have no interest in Western music, but we were like, yeah, we'll go. And I still see those women periodically at the post-Mormon things. I saw one of them a couple of weeks ago, and I look at them fondly because they invited us to go do something. Excellent. So things like that. You want to go to the park and have a picnic? Yes. You want to come over and have a happy hour? Yes. You want to go to a movie that we don't care anything about? Yes. We're going anywhere, anything somebody invites us to.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I've heard that before, just a year of saying yes. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any interest in that. And yes, I'm going. I love that. Yeah.
Yes. And putting ourselves out of our comfort zone socially too. Even doing this is not my comfort zone, but I am in a phase in my life where I like putting myself in situations where I have to push myself a little. I have to do something that isn't in my typical skill set or wheelhouse. So
good for you.
Yeah. And also to kind of take a little bit of a almost like a relief society role where I want the women to feel comfortable at this coffee thing. I kind of got the coffee thing going, and as it was starting to anytime it takes any turn that I feel like is going to be exclusive, I put down the hatchet. I say, no, we're not exclusive. If I want to bring my neighbor, I'm bringing my neighbor. If this woman isn't technically in Waka, but she wants to come, she can come. If we need to change locations or do certain things, I want this to be so inclusive. I reject anything that is not inclusive.
Interesting. That I love that. That's very interesting. I tried to do a meetup with women over 60, and I got such feedback. oh, well, I'm 40 and I can't come. And I'm like, no, you can't, because I don't want to hear about your teenage daughter's racquetball class. Or I don't want to hear about your potty training issues right now. I'm past that.
Yeah.
You know, you just get to a point where you don't want to hear your teenage daughter's getting ready for prom. I'm like, good for you. Can we move on? You know, and it's just, you're at a different season of your life, you know, but something as gathering as a coffee group at Harmon's, it should be exactly what you said, completely inclusive.
Some of the couple of the younger ones have said, like, you know, when she showed up, I invited one when she showed up and we were clearly all older than her. I said, I'm sorry, we're all so much older. And she said, you know, I feel like I can grow from friendships with women of all ages. And I said, and I agree. I can grow from, you know, having a friendship with you as well. So
yes, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, the church was pretty exclusive, and it's nice to not be in that mindset anymore. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's because I grew up a lot of my years in Utah and raised my kids in Utah. You know, I never had the rule you can only play with the Mormon kids. I never believed in that. Or you can only date Mormon guys, or you can only la la la. None of that. I didn't believe in that. I still don't believe in that. And I think the poor people that live here that are not LDS, I mean, I have heard that it's traumatic for them. I ran into a friend at our 40-year high school reunion, and she said, this is the first one I've been to because I've been in therapy for the last several decades because I was Catholic, being, you know, trying to live in Utah, in Salt Lake City as a Catholic girl. And she said, it's been so hard for me. My whole life, I felt like I am just not right. I'm not good enough. I'm not pure enough. I'm not whatever enough to be a friend.
Yeah.
A friend or included in friend groups. So I thought, wow, we've done it wrong. Mormonism.
Yeah. I met a woman on a hike a few weeks ago who has never been LDS, and but she's from Provo, Salt Lake, somewhere down there, up there rather. And so she said that what happened when she was in elementary school, she and the girls were friends, but when she went to junior high, and so the schools were kind of divided up, some girl asked her, what ward are you in? And she said, oh, I'm not a Mormon. And almost immediately she was left out of every cluster. And so she told her mom, they don't want to play with me because I didn't have a ward. And she goes, oh, honey, anytime somebody asks you that, you just make up this or number. Like you say, I'm in the 83rd ward or whatever the number was that the mom told her. She said, that's what I always did. I was just, and once you're in junior high or high school, they don't necessarily know all the ward numbers. So they don't know that you're making something up. But she lived that way all the way through the rest of her years that she lived there. She lied about a ward that she went to.
And it makes all the difference, right?
Yeah.
You're fine. You're okay. You're accepted.
See, that's the biggest blessing was, you know, being raised in Illinois and raising our kids in Oregon. My kids never dated people that my daughter, she had a friend group. It wasn't really one-on-one dating. It was a group of people that all got together and went to prom and stuff like that together. They were in the ward, but all of the other kids dated people that weren't members of the church because that's all there was.
Right.
There wasn't anybody else. And so I never had that mentality, thank heavens. But yeah. I know we live in Draper part of the year, Judy, and it is a very weird thing, how nice everybody is, and to see church things at Costco and comments. People are, you're overhearing things at Harmon's and people are talking about Relief Society, and I'm like, this is weird. This is so weird. I can't imagine what that is like. So, well, you have just been a joy, absolute joy. And I think that Lila and I are going to be bebopping down to a coffee group.
I hope so. I hope so.
That would be so fun. We'll take a road trip, Lila, go down for coffee hour, and then we'll go on
a hike. Yeah.
That would be so fun. So thank you for taking time out of your day and for sharing your wisdom. It's been absolutely amazing.
You're welcome.
Can't wait to see the comments and to get the feedback, because I think this has been so helpful for people that
You're
I
doing it right. You're doing it right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It makes me feel good to think that other people think it's a story worth sharing. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And again, you've been pre-warned. We'll see you in a few months.
I look forward to it.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Whew. What a joy, right?
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. And I love that her story was not wrapped in perfection or wrapped in privilege. It was wrapped in reality.
Yeah.
And so many of us that have gone through different things, I would rather listen to people that have struggled and survived than people who have just coasted along on this beautiful, lovely life that Brad Wilcox has pretended that's reality. So anyway,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for taking time out of your day, Lila, and we will see you all next week on She Became Visible. We are all interested in your story. So if you have a story that you would like to share with us on She Became Visible, please contact me. Please put something in the comments. I would love to hear your story, just as we heard Judy's story. It was amazing to hear. And it was just kind of an accident that we were there and her and her husband shared. And we were like, I love her. We want her on our show. So you tell us your story and we will have you on as a guest. So thanks again for joining us on She Became Visible. Bye-bye.
Bye.